I was told that all life comes from the sun, photosynthesis. Everything. We had to draw diagrams in school of that circle of life. There are people out there who still think all life comes from the sun. In 1999, they discovered the black smokers in the Pacific, which had life forms, volumes of life forms. The fastest growing life forms on Earth, the tube worms and the smokers in the Pacific, that live 1 mile, 2 miles below the top of the ocean, absolutely no sunlight. They live off chemosynthesis, not photosynthesis. Their feet of the tube worms are in about less than 40 degrees water, and their heads are in superheated water above boiling point. No animal lives like that, and they grow faster than any other creatures, animals on Earth. So it's not that we should have taught about that because we didn't know about that, but we shouldn't have taught photosynthesis as absolute. We should not have taught the atom being the smallest particle with 3 charges, electron, neutron, and electron, neutron, and proton going around them as absolute, when we now know there's 17 subatomic particles. We shouldn't have been taught that that space was a vacuum, when now we know that 97% of it is black energy and has some mass. We should never have been taught that the black holes were the most vacuous space on Earth. In fact, it's in our language, oh, that's going to go in a black hole, in a vacuum. No, it's the densest part of the universe, the opposite. So that's as much as we knew then, and I understand that. As long as you know that there's possibility to have another truth. So it's okay to teach the Earth is flat if you know that this is only what we know for the moment, not it's absolutely flat. It's absolutely the smallest particle. It's absolutely the sun. It's absolutely a vacuum. So all teaching has to be, this is what we know at the moment. It's a different way of teaching. It's a different way of learning, because you're always open-minded for the possibility of something else. So we're taught lies. We're taught a wrong way of teaching, a wrong way of thinking. I went through all my schooling, and when I organized everything, people told me, well, you organize them alphabetically. That's the way we organize our information. Our dictionary is alphabetical. Our Encyclopedia Britannica is alphabetical. That's where we got information. Page numbers were sequential, hierarchical. I'll get back to page numbers in a minute. But we didn't realize there was other ways of organizing information. You can organize things by location. That's the way a map is organized. The way things in this room, if you were going to talk about this room, it's by location. The alphabet works. Time is a way of organizing things. If I tell you a story, it's organized by time. A joke is by time. How a company does business over years is a time. Time is a great organizer of disparate pieces of information. Maybe God's greatest invention was time. What did he invent that was more basic than time? That everything didn't all of a sudden happen once and it was over. He could have done that too. If we believe in a supreme being, he could have done that, right? And you can organize things by subject matter. A department store has a shoe department, a hat department, a different department by subject, by category. And you can organize things hierarchically, from the smallest to the biggest, from the bluest to the lightest blue or whatever. You have options when you start any project of what's the best way in. Where do you find the front door that lets you in? And that is the organization of that information. Let's get back to numbers for a minute, because I brought it up and I thought of something. In the Western world, not in the Eastern world, which we found out recently, but the first printed books in the Western world is generally believed to be done by Gutenberg in Mainz, Germany, in 1352, I think. 1453, we don't know, 1450, some people 1350, 13. So. And he did the Bible, and it had 2 different editions. One had 42 lines, one had, they call them in different editions because he started and he changed the numbers of lines, so it would be a couple more lines, it would be less pieces of vellum he had to do. And there's a vellum edition and a paper edition. There's several editions. There's a lot of stuff about it. And he originally made, it's thought, 180 of them. This is all trivia. You don't have to know this. But what's interesting is he invented the type, which he poured in metal, and he poured this metal type. And he poured the relationship of every number, every letter to every other letter. So the spacing was perfect. Because each letter is shaped differently, it groups differently with the next letter to have the same amount of white space between them to have a perfect read. Mm-hmm. So we have a 26-letter alphabet. He had hundreds in his alphabet. So that it was perfectly set. He had to invent the ink because there's only water-based ink. He invented an oil-based ink because you had to have it to lay on the surface and not dry while you put down the piece of paper. He invented the paper and the vellum that would work. He invented the press with his brother. And so it went on. It took 99 years after he finished his Bible for somebody else to invent pagination, to put page numbers on the pages. Now, page numbers, you could say, one could say, I can say, was the precursor to Google. Because they allowed you to find something. So, although we give Gutenberg all this credit, which he is due, because he invented the paper, the ink, the press, and the type, and perfect spacing. Spacing better than has ever been done before. According to the founder and former chairman of the board of Adobe, that is the chief electronic type purveyor, he says we have never been able to set, with our technology, a book better than the Gutenberg Bible. So we have all admiration for this man, who died penniless, by the way. And his later books were probably printed by somebody else because he had to sell the company. He was bankrupt. But that's a trivia story. But the idea of finding something, page 87. The idea of flying through information and pulling down things as we are beginning to do now on the internet. What a dream. What a dream. That's the waking dream, as the poet said. The waking dream of being able to find out what you're interested in. How do I get through a day? Well, tracking my interests.